Hello, good morning, everyone. I'm Thea Del Barrio from Colliers International. And before we officially start our program, I would like to draw your attention to a few functions and setups for today's webinar. So the first one is the control panel on your screen. I believe that's on the right side. You will see several functions that let you interact with us. So just let me go through some of them. One, as attendees, you will be unable to unmute your mic for this session, but don't worry, you will be able to interact with us through the chat function. So if you have questions that you'd like us to address later during the open forum, just send in your question through the chat box in your control panel and click send, and we will ensure that David, our host, will read them aloud for the panel to answer. We will try to address as many questions as possible during the course of the open forum. Next, we also have prepared some handouts for this webinar, including the full report from our main presenter and Herman Miller. Soft copies of these handouts are available for you to download in the handouts function of your control panel. If you are unable to download today for any reason, we will ensure that you will have plenty of other opportunities and you will be able to access these reports via digital channels. So make sure that you're following us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. Lastly, we've partnered with Herman Miller and CWC Interiors for this webinar series. CWC is at the forefront of innovation on workplace trends, and in this pandemic crisis, CWC's commitment is to assist the Philippine workforce and employees adjust to the new work environment needs and requirements. So, I'm pleased to announce to everyone who registered for this webinar, CWC's program on work from home will provide additional 5% discount on all its Herman Miller work from home solutions, task chairs, tables, lighting, and tech support. So you will see the contact details pop up on your screen. And if you're not able to save it, please, you're welcome to contact the organizers and they'll gladly help you out. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, we are ready to begin our webinar. With that, I am pleased to introduce our moderator for today's session. He is the host of the ABS-CBN News Channel's executive class. Please welcome Mr. David Celdran.
Hey, thank you so much, Thea. Good to see you again.
David.
I remember our first webinar just a few months ago. And of course, thanks to Colliers International Philippines for inviting me once again as your moderator. I wish we could all be together in the same room like we used to in the good old days, so to speak, meaning pre-COVID-19 days. But of course, this is the new normal and we got to do what we got to do. And the best thing is we have technology on our side so that we can, of course, innovate and get around the obstacles of physical distancing. And that's why we have this webinar. Okay, so once again, very good morning to all of you and welcome to our webinar today. It's entitled Survival and Revival, Flexible Workspace Strategies for Commercial Real Estate. Now, just remember this forum is presented by Colliers International Philippines in partnership with CWC Interiors and Herman Miller and with media partner, my channel, ABS-CBN News Channel. Now, this is the second session for Colliers International's Lifespaces webinar series. And during the first session, we raffled off an Aeron remastered chair, right? And if you were here during the last webinar but missed out on that prize, well, you can try your luck again today because courtesy of CWC Interiors, we are raffling off another Herman Miller chair. This time I hear it's the Express 2 chair. Anyway, so make sure to stick around until the end of the webinar and who knows, you just might win that incredible prize. Okay, but before we get all excited about that raffle, let's bring it back to business first. Even before the COVID-19 pandemic, the world we live in was already being described as VUCA. That's right, VUCA. V for volatile, U for uncertain, C for complex, and A for ambiguous. Remember that, VUCA. It's a new word. The pandemic exacerbated this world of VUCA, and businesses and economies around the world had to shut down as we all struggled to figure out a new normal and come up with different responses and solutions to keep us afloat and find strategies that could eventually lead to a economic or business revival. Now, for the office market, that's what we're talking about today. While the current situation is volatile and complex and the future remains ambiguous, VUCA, there's a need for companies to become more agile, to figure out a setup that could allow them to contract or grow, or perhaps even reposition as they navigate from survival to revival mode. So we ask the question, could flexible workspaces hold the key to this new environment and help usher in a new normal for occupier models? That's what we hope to answer during this session, and that's why we invited knowledgeable speakers, experts to shed light on this topic. So let's begin. To start off our event, I'm pleased to introduce our keynote speaker. He leads the Flexible Workspace Consulting team for Asia Pacific at Colliers, having founded the business line in 2015. He also works with operators, occupiers, asset owners, and investors, offering consultancy, advisory, and transaction services to leverage the fast-growing and dynamic sector. He has overseen over 2 million square feet of flexible workspace transactions on behalf of operators and advised some of the largest asset owners in Asia on their strategy towards integrating flexible workspace and meaningful amenities to their portfolios, while also supporting Colliers' occupier clients in the sector. Everyone, please welcome the Director for Flexible Workspace Services at Colliers Asia Pacific, Jonathan Wright. Johnny.
Quite the introduction from David. Thanks for that. And good morning to everyone. Good morning to the fellow panelists on this session. I think one of the panelists might have got up a little bit earlier than the rest of us, based over in Dubai. So I'm looking forward to hearing Ollie speak a little bit later. So I'll try and sort of go through this as quickly as possible, and it really just tries to break down essentially flexible workspace as a sector and really what that means to occupiers. So while I have a role at Colliers which sort of transcends the different stakeholders in the real estate market and in the flexible workspace sector, particularly working with operators, occupiers, and asset owners, we'll focus today on occupiers and some of the component parts of flexible workspace and some of the models that could be used to as part of a real estate strategy for a sort of post-COVID era, if we ever get there. So if we could just pop through over to the next slide. So Colliers Flexible Workspace Consulting team is essentially global. I have a colleague in London covering our EMEA markets and a colleague in New York covering our Americas markets. What we do, I think David introduced pretty well, is basically work across all of those with all of those stakeholders, and we leverage our business lines within Colliers to deliver for the client. So we can go to next one. So here is really just a very, very simplified image which basically breaks down the component parts of flexible workspace. So when people say flexible workspace, typically the first thing they think about is co-working, and typically the first thing they think about is hot desking and the sort of Instagram shots that we all kind of see of the WeWorks of this world. And you know, some occupiers may say, well, you know, flexible workspace or co-working is not for me. But what we've tried to visualize here is that it's obviously much, much more than just hot desk. So there are really the component parts, and most occupiers will need a blend of these component parts as part of their real estate strategy. So if you break down the component parts, you've got sort of meeting spaces that could also be breakout spaces, lounge type spaces, and these are typically used on an hourly or daily basis, usually on demand, you know, usually shared facilities. The traditional sort of co-working, and it obviously shows how fast and how far that we've come in flexible workspace, that the word traditional has been attached to co-working, which is obviously a fairly new word and phrase for some people. And again, co-working is used, is fairly shared. You have sort of hot desks or dedicated desks, usually fairly open plan, and this is the kind of Instagram shot that most people see, and that's used probably on a daily or monthly type basis, which is a little bit different than the one before that. And then private offices, these are typically monthly or annually. Does what it says on the tin, they're private offices. There are some shared facilities, but largely the space that you're using for your staff is private. And then you've got the kind of enterprise solution, which is usually part of a flexible workspace or broader flexible workspace location or center. There is some ability to customize and brand, and there's usually dedicated floors or offices, and they're usually taken on annual plus. But what we've seen in a lot of our occupiers is that these component parts are quite often blended so that the occupier gets the best of both. We can pop to the next one. And it's interesting to think, we'll not spend too long on this slide, but it's interesting just to think and show this graphically that essentially flexible workspace is essentially outsourcing your real estate function. So you would have one cost to an operator or perhaps a landlord if they're running their own center, and the sort of connections are sort of the costs are sort of much more clear. And then if you do a leasehold and then you self-deliver, you've got all of these different costs that you've got to think about. So that just very quickly visualizes that. If we go to the next slide. And then here's some of the reasons that we see occupier clients use flexible workspace. So here's the really sort of 6 key drivers, and I'm sure there's people on this panel later this morning that can go into these in a little bit more detail and perhaps pull out some case studies, and some of the other guys on the panel could probably pull out some other things as well. But broadly speaking, agility essentially. So basically being able to take shorter terms, be able to consume the real estate that they actually need. There's obviously a financial element, so obviously limited need to put in capital, which could be particularly pertinent in the not too distant future as we kind of come out of COVID and some businesses don't want to commit capital. There are operational efficiencies, so that we saw on the previous slide, the fact that you're not dealing with all of the other bits and pieces. You've really essentially got one bill. Urgency, so depending on the product that you want, you could usually move that pretty quickly. And some people use it as transformational, but that's probably one for the workplace strategists out there. And then in terms of employee engagement, probably one for them as well. So if we pop to the next slide. And these are some of the things that Colliers can do in terms of just reviewing a portfolio review and just working with occupiers just to go through, what are their locations look like. It's important to sit down and sort of look at a portfolio basis rather than just an individual office basis, and basically work through, does it make sense to actually use flex, or does it make sense to stay in traditional offices? And then the next slide. And so here are the models. So what we've just gone through prior to this is basically the component parts and the reason to use flex. What we're going to take you through now is just a few models that we're seeing, because really what you need to do as an occupier is select the component parts of the flexible workspace that you really need, and then deploy that across a range of solutions. And these solutions are essentially occupier models, and we've broken down different ones. And again, you might need a range of these solutions might apply, and obviously we've talked about the different component parts that would usually apply. So next slide. So the first fairly obvious one is a managed office. So you could take, essentially, this would probably be more typical for a 300 person managed offices are rare, but sort of 40 to sort of 100 or 200 people would probably be the sweet spot for using a model like this. And these are usually used where the occupier kind of understands the benefits that a flexible workspace can offer, but doesn't necessarily want to share all of those different things with the other users in the building, so wants a little bit more ownership and privacy. And what happens in this scenario is that the operator would deliver essentially a fully outsourced workspace, which would include all of the elements of launching and operating an office. And the facility can be customized, it can be a private environment, it can look and like the occupier's own space, but essentially it's all managed by a third party, i.e. someone like TC or Common Ground who are on this call today. And the occupier then has an ability to increase flexibility and of their portfolio. This type of solution is often delivered by specialist operators, but also delivered by typical traditional flexible workspace operators, and in some cases directly by the landlord of the building. And this is a pretty straightforward piece, but it does fill that sort of grey area between sort of a lease that an occupier could have, or that gap between a lease that an occupier could have, or using sort of more traditional private office flexible workspace. Essentially gives best of both worlds. There's rarely sort of cost savings in this scenario, but it does give you sort of much more flexibility, and there's operational efficiencies and things like that that can be built in, which then sort of have savings in other ways. So if we could pop to the next slide. And the Flex and Core model is something that Colliers sort of pioneered sort of 3, 4, perhaps even 5 years ago now. And this was really a result of what our clients were asking for, particularly our occupier clients who were looking for flexibility, but still to hold some core space. So what we do here is take an occupier through the journey, and perhaps they have sort of fluctuating headcounts, and again, particularly relevant right now. Or alternatively, the occupier just wishes to outsource some of the component parts that we discussed earlier, such as meeting spaces or space for a project team. What we would do in this instance is identify an operator that could partner with the occupier to enter an asset. And route one would be, essentially the occupier commits to less space with the landlord for their core requirement, and the operator, or indeed the landlord, launches a flexible workspace location within the same building. Route two would be essentially the occupier commits to anchor a new location and then has sort of expansion rights into the flex space across the rest of the flex space. In this instance, the occupier can benefit from long-term security for their core operations and have some flexibility to grow. One of the key sort of obstacles of this is getting buy-in from the landlord to essentially effectively execute this. We go to the next slide. This is where we start getting a little bit more creative with a reverse flex scenario. So where an occupier has underutilized leasehold space and the traditional subletting or assignment strategies that people like Colliers and some of our competitors would work through, those traditional strategies may not work right now. So again, particularly relevant right now, where there's a lot of sublease and assignment space coming to market as companies downsize. So that strategy may not work, and also the occupier might need to take the space back in the future. So what this essentially does is look at where there's vacant space or underutilized space and works with an operator to essentially repurpose that space into a flexible workspace. It can sort of mitigate the expenses and even generate an income, if the market picks up. There are a number of different strategies or structures that you could do that on with an operator, but essentially you are going to need a lot of capital to actually change this space, because usually an occupier's space doesn't suit flexible workspace location, so there would probably need to be some capital coming from the occupier side in this scenario, and you would also need consent from the landlord. Next slide. Hub and spoke. So this has been talked around a lot. There's nothing new about hub and spoke models. Occupiers have been using hub and spoke for years and years, and probably someone's done, and I'm sure there's been hundreds of presentations on hub and spoke models at different industry events. So it's not really anything new, but essentially it reduces reliance on a single headquarters. And I guess the difference between the hub and spoke that we're talking about here and hub and spoke of previous times is that the spokes would probably be flexible workspace locations. So essentially you can reduce the amount of space you've got in your headquarters. You can take smaller hubs across the city, region, or country, and typically you take those in lower cost locations. The benefits for that is you get access to talent which may not otherwise be available, particularly now as people are traveling less and wanting to live in less crowded areas. You would be safe to assume given the current situation, and it could just sort of improve the sort of balance of the employees' experience, and it still enables the occupier to maintain that central sort of flagship HQ where it's needed. Some of the concerns and some of the issues in sort of doing this is ensuring consistency of the workspace quality across a distributed office network. So if you're working with multiple flex operators, ensuring the quality and consistency of that experience for the individual takes a little bit of work. And there's sort of operational management considerations for a high number of locations. Outsourcing the delivery of these locations can reduce operational burden, but yeah, we need to really focus on the workspace environment. And then the next slide. So this is very similar to Hub and Spoke, but basically moves all of your employees essentially onto a digital network. So here you don't really have the physical space at all, and you basically have an app. And Colliers have recently launched the Colliers Mobility Pass as well, which is the only global platform. And that basically enables people to, occupiers to use a distributed network that's all booked basically through your phone. So that makes life a little bit easier, and enables employees to really work exactly where they want. Perhaps this won't be necessarily a long-term solution for a lot of occupiers, but for some it will. And it's a particularly efficient and cost-effective way to manage distributed workforces. So that's sort of brings me to the end of my sort of opening ramble, if you like, and sort of covers off the different component parts of FlexSpace. It covers off how they can be deployed across different models, and I look forward to hearing the rest of the panelists in the rest of the session. So thank you very much, David. I'll hand back to you.
Thanks so much, Jonathan Wright. I wish we could you could hear us clapping from our homes right now. But thank you so much for that presentation. One of the things I miss so much about these physical seminars or physical conventions is the fact that you can actually hear each other. You can get feedback from the audience. But again, we're all getting used to this new normal. So thanks so much, Jonathan Wright, for that presentation. Now, don't worry, you'll have a chance to ask questions to Jonathan in a short while. In the meantime, let's take a short break, a really short break to stretch our legs, get a cup of coffee, restroom break, and I hope you get the chance to prepare your questions, because when we come back after the short break, we'll have a chance to meet our panelists and, of course, get a chance to ask questions to them, including Johnny as well. So in the meantime, I'm going to leave you with this message from Colliers International. Okay, that was quick. I hope that was enough time to get yourself a cup of coffee or stretch your legs, stretch your arms. But hopefully you're moving back into your seats or your beds. Who knows? We can't see where you are right now in your homes, or in your offices. But hopefully you're right now in front of your screens, because it's time to go back to our webinar. And of course, this webinar is entitled Survival and Revival. survival, and revival. That's right. Flexible workspace strategies for commercial real estate. And this is presented by Colliers International Philippines in partnership with CWC Interiors and Herman Miller. And of course, my channel, media partner, the ABS-CBN News Channel. So let's begin our open forum. And let's call back Johnny Wright to rejoin me on screen. Johnny, can I see you on screen? This is a new software for us, so it takes some getting used to. Let's have Johnny Wright back on screen. Well, there you go, Johnny. Hello. And I'd also like to introduce our fellow panelists who represent some of the country's leading flexible workspace operators, including some of the globe's best corporations. Now, our first panelist started his role at the Executive Center as a business development manager in Sydney, Australia in 2014, and moved up to lead the entire Sydney business across different functions. Now, he has just recently taken the challenge to launch the Executive Center in the Philippines and is responsible for the growth and expansion of the Manila market, which is set to open its flagship center in the first quarter of 2021. Everyone, let's welcome the country manager for the Executive Center in the Philippines, Josh Alfafara. Josh, can you join us on screen, Josh?
David.
Hello, Josh. Okay, thanks for joining us. Okay, we're gonna move on now to our next panelist, also in the Philippines. Our next panelist joined Common Ground Philippines in February this year. He's in charge of expansion and business development for future Common Ground venues across Metro Manila. And over the last 5 years, he was an expat working in the retail industry in Malaysia, notably as business development and expansion for Decathlon Malaysia. He was previously in charge of tenant representation for retail markets with JLL Malaysia. Everyone, let's welcome the country manager for Common Ground Philippines, Kristoffer Velhagen. Casey. Hello, Casey. Oh, there
Good
you
morning,
are.
David.
Okay. Good morning. I think we're almost
Good morning.
complete. Let me introduce our last panelist, who works with the Herman Miller Insight Group, which is responsible for the commissioning, overseeing, and presenting of insights into the latest thinking in workplace design and other issues associated with that, like happiness in the workplace, generations at work, creativity in the workplace, agile working, and the psychology of collaboration, a lot of stuff there. He joined Herman Miller in January 2011 and has since become a valued member of the Insight team, working closely with the international sales force, as well as public and private sector clients. He's been involved with a variety of international office projects and has been based in Dubai since 2015 to deliver insights throughout APAC and Middle East and Africa regions. Please welcome the Insight Program Manager for APAC and MEA regions at Herman Miller, Oliver Baxter. Oliver, good morning. It's what, 6 in the morning there in Dubai, something like that?
Yeah, it's 6:30, yeah. Good morning, David. Hi, everybody.
Good morning.
This time of the year, it's pretty warm in Dubai as well, right? Even at 6 in the morning.
Yeah.
Okay. Good morning, guys. Good morning, everyone. And we have some interesting questions already. So let's kick it off with this first question. I mean, let's be frank about it. Government economic numbers just came out. Economy, GDP contracted by over 16%. Everyone is feeling it. And those who are participating obviously are all feeling it as well. So let's talk about cost first, okay? Let's get to the bottom of this. Cost. What are the advantages of a flexible workspace in terms of the bottom line? Jonathan?
Yeah, it really depends how you use it. I think if you use flexible workspace in the wrong way, it can obviously end up costing you a lot more. If you use it in the right way and you use it efficiently, then it can end up costing you less. I think the main benefits are really that you're not tying yourself into long-term arrangements most of the time, and that you do have the ability to sort of use a lot of the spaces when you need them, which reduces your liability. Does it reduce your cost on a square foot basis? Typically, no. Does it reduce your overall expenses and your costs, and particularly the need to deploy any capital? Yes, it does. So I think it really depends on how you use it. And look, there's a reason that there's a reason that Colliers and some of our competitors exist, and that's to help our occupier clients navigate through these kind of things and look at how they would develop a strategy and then execute on it. So yes, it would definitely cost you more on a square foot basis, but if you use it in the right way, the overall costs should be lower.
So clearly, it's all about how you use it, how you maximize that space. So let's ask Josh and Casey how clients, how occupiers could maximize that space so that in the long term it becomes cost effective. Josh, let me start with you. Like this question, it is perfect for this theme. In what way can flexible workspaces or workspace providers address cost-cutting measures of companies, especially given the fact that seat leasing has been known to be more expensive than just looking for a permanent space? I mean, this goes back to what Jonathan was saying, short-run costs versus long-term costs. Josh.
Sure. Yeah, well, David, companies save about 20 to 40% on fit outs alone. They also save on operational costs, having to spend on your receptionist, your technical support, your maintenance. You pay for services you avail of on an ad hoc basis or on-demand basis. And on top of that, having the ability to sign up on shorter term agreements and expand when needed. Reducing long-term fixed leases will be something that businesses will definitely need to explore. For some businesses, a wait and see game is out of the question. It's just not an option for them, as they need their cash flow to be strong at this moment in order to survive. Why spend on capital on permanent space when it can be used elsewhere?
Casey, as companies undergo cost-cutting measures, and in some cases very extreme cost-cutting measures, what is the cost argument for a flexible workspace?
Just to add on to what Jonathan and Josh said, obviously you are more flexible as far as your lease contract is concerned, and that directly translates into initial costs such as deposits. The initial cash out from the very beginning is much lighter as compared to occupying an entire floor space for a longer period of time. On top of that, obviously fit out costs become a smaller fraction of the costs, because it's basically plug and play for a lot of these occupiers right now. So off the bat, there's huge costs, huge cost savings right away.
Okay, and speaking of cost, I think the attraction of work from home is not just the health side or on the safety side. I think for a lot of corporations right now, they're seeing that it's become cheaper for people for their employees to be working from home. This has become like a choice now, work from home versus permanent office. Now, how does Jonathan, how do you think flexible workspaces kind of fit into the middle as a fantastic compromise between the two? Or not a compromise, the word compromise, but rather as an opportunity between both?
Yeah, I think we're in a situation now where it's about choice for the individual. People have got different circumstances. People have got different concerns. People have got different levels of confidence with their workplace and what they're doing on what's happening at governmental levels on a city by city basis, and even parts of different cities. So I think it's really important right now to look at the occupiers, treat their staff really by giving them the highest level of choice they can possibly give them at this point. And obviously there are financial and commercial restrictions around that, but I think we're in a time where I guess we can't avoid using it, but unprecedented sort of times where people have got to look at how they use different spaces. And look, flexible workspace the sort of silver bullet and the answer to everyone? No, of course it's not. Some people are still going to want to work from home. Some people are going to prefer to go to the office, and flexible workspace is one solution of that. And I think if we go back to the component parts piece of the presentation, there are component parts which an occupier can use and potentially an individual can use as part of that organization that might not necessarily be going in for 8 hours a day to work out of a hot desk or 8 hours a day to work out of a private office in a flexible workspace, but perhaps it's an opportunity to get out of the house, go and interact, go and have some social interactions where it's possible and where it's safe. And work out of an environment where there's some people around to get those interactions. I think probably Ollie can talk a little bit more about this more intelligently than I can, but it is certainly important. And maybe it's hiring a meeting room at a flexible workspace near your house to meet with a colleague or meet with a a client, for example. But again, I would stress that it's so important right now to make sure that that's a safe environment. It's to make sure that the individual is comfortable using that space, and that all of the government in the relevant government in that city, all of the restrictions and protocols that are in place to make sure that that is safe. But assuming all that is the case, then I think flexible workspace becomes part of that. And if we kind of go back to the phrases around flex and core, which is the phrase flex and core is very specific to a certain model, and we kind of ran through that model in the presentation. Flex and core is very specific to that model, but the phrase sort of flex and core makes sense because you might have or hub and spoke or whatever phrase you want to use, but you might have a core office, which is your organization's office, which is we're all familiar with. Might be some flex space in between, and that flex could be meeting rooms, it could be breakout spaces, it could be private offices, it could be hot desks with an operator or with a platform that gives you access to an operator. And home is undoubtedly going to be a bigger part of the working sort of ecosystem going forward. And but not everyone is set up to work from home. I live in Hong Kong, my apartment's 300 or 400 square feet, and I'm currently sat on a pretty uncomfortable non-ergonomic stool as we speak on this call. So yeah, I've just WhatsApped Ollie separately to ask him for a free Herman Miller chair if I can. But yeah, like, it's not particularly comfortable or ergonomic to be sat here for 8 hours a day, and I don't particularly like it. So for me, I'd prefer to go to the office, but situation dictates that I can't.
I'll be asking Oliver in a short while about the research that provides lessons and insights about work from home. But before I get to Oliver, I just want to quickly go to Casey about that same question. As companies are no longer just looking at work from home arrangements as a stopgap measure or an emergency measure, some have even said this could be a permanent thing, even post COVID-19. What alternative do flexible workspace operators such as yours offer vis-a-vis work from home?
Well, based on what Jonathan just mentioned right now, working from home certainly from the beginning may not have hampered productivity, but in the long run, some companies have come to realize that it's not as possibly sustainable as they think it to be. And for the simple reasons like what Jonathan just mentioned, there are some factors that constitute for working from home being unsustainable, such as loneliness, not having the office infrastructure such as basic high-speed internet, printing services, having that community vibe. All these factors play a role. Ultimately, some people struggle with collaboration, training new people. Projects tend to take longer. So in the long run, I'm not saying flexible workspace is the, silver bullet, but we offer a hybrid solution wherein people can tend to still work from home and then still have a place of work where they can conduct projects, continue to coordinate with their colleagues for more efficient doing way of business. So, we certainly complement work from home. There are some things that you will truly not be able to do in an office, at home, as what you'd be able to do in an office, and that's just the reality. Yeah.
Okay, Josh, very quickly before I go to Oliver.
Sure. No, I agree. A company offering permanent work from home arrangements to their employees is one thing, but whether it's conducive in the long run for their employees is another. I mean, I believe people need options. Work in the future will be about where you work best and what makes sense to the business.
Okay,
I mean,
Oliver,
sorry, just to add to developers, landlords, fit-out contractors, flexible workspace providers, they need to actually really start embracing space as a service. What are you offering in your space that you don't find from home? There'll need to be an increased need for health and wellness initiatives, collaborative zones, quiet zones, et cetera, new technology. Everything we're familiar with about how we design, build, occupy our spaces will fundamentally change for sure. And the focus will always need to be on the people.
Oliver, share with us the insights. It's been 5 months, at least for some cities, that have been under quarantine, what kind of experience what kind of insights rather and lessons have we learned from work from home arrangements in terms of productivity, in terms of building corporate culture, corporate identity, and let's not forget the ability to collaborate, which is sometimes lost in these remote work from home arrangements?
Yeah, good question, David. If I might just add to something that Josh said earlier as well, I think what's good for the business about these kind of flexible working arrangements and ultimately empowering the employee with choice is that what's good for the business is what's really good for the employees. So by giving them more choice, what it really boils down to is autonomy. That's what we call one of the fundamental human needs at Herman Miller, of which we've identified 6 motivational factors that influence people in the way that they work. Autonomy being one of the main ones that's influenced by the interior design of the space, because that's what we've been measuring. But I think when you're giving people more freedom outside of the office, then autonomy is only going to exponentially increase thereafter. So I think that's really important to just remember that, you know, people are the biggest expense to business, right? You know, I understand why the costs of co-working are more than the traditional office, because you're getting people thrown in there, right? So on average, you cost 9 times more than the space that you're consuming. So that kind of makes sense from that side. But to go to your question, David, around, you know, what are the results saying? You know, lots of people have been challenging some of the early data that's coming out of companies like ART Solutions or the Leaseman Index, which are kind of saying similar things. But people are kind of questioning it, going, well, it's not a large enough data set, you know, it's not a longitudinal study. It's been done in a very strict instance of COVID and lockdown. So maybe we can't take that data into account because they might not necessarily like the results. But I just like to remind people that remote working, home working isn't anything new. It just might be new to some people, right? Remote working has been around for a very long time. My father has been remote working his entire career. So there's a lot of data out there from like Gallup. So Gallup, they've been doing lots of longitudinal studies around like engagement and remote working. So they've highlighted that, this is from their 2017 data. If you want to get the most engagement from your employees, then you probably only want them in the office for maybe 2 days. That's it. And then allow them to work in other spaces thereafter. So it's empowering people with choice. And they may decide to come into the office all day, every day. But if you're giving them the option of saying, well, you know, the minimum we require is 2 days, and then you can work wherever for the other, then they might choose co-working, they might choose working from home, you know, lots of these flexible serviced office options as well out there. So again, it's about choice. And unfortunately, the working from home data that we've had during COVID has basically demonstrated that working from home is significantly better than working in offices. And that's like quite a shock to me, because, you know, I provide the furniture that goes into these offices, right? So that's a bit of an issue. So sorry, just to give you the data there. So 80% agreement with working from home in comparison to only 62% of employees agreeing that their workplace enables them to work productively. And yeah, that's from the Leaseman Index. So that's a little bit concerning for me.
But of course, as you said, I mean, it's about giving choices to your employees about where they'd like to work, the office, in a flexible workspace, or to work from home. I mean, that's the key here. Make your employees happy by giving them choices. Let me go to the questions that have come in from our participants. Some of them have to do with health protocols in these flexible workspace that we're talking about. Okay, Josh, let's talk about that. What have you done, or what have you instituted in your flexible workspaces that ensure safety standards, health protocols, especially trying to stop the spread of COVID-19 in common areas?
Yeah, so I mean, you know, the health of our members, of our team is our utmost important, and we've done, you know, the standard temperature checks with coming in. Anything that has to do with contact has been digitized. to ensure, just to limit the spread of the virus. Our meeting rooms have reduced capacity, wherein chairs are marked. New technology is also emerging in terms of just being able to sense the capacity of meeting rooms or offices, and these are the measures that we've had in place, really, and also that boils down to following government protocols across our different cities, and ensuring everybody that comes in are actually declaring their current health status.
All right, thank you so much. That question, by the way, was from Aero King Francisco. Aero, thanks so much for that. Similar, but this has to do more with the implications on the viability of flexible workspaces. Maybe Casey, you can answer this, and Johnny as well. Right now, this is from Jess Sitan. Right now, offices are required to have social distancing, thus affecting the ideal density for flexible workspaces, obviously. How do you think it will affect the business viability of flex workspace moving forward? Great question, Casey. I mean, it's not just permanent offices that have to adjust. So do flexible workspaces like yours.
Obviously, health is the utmost priority right now, for regardless with whether you're a traditional office space or a flexi workspace. You really have to take into consideration how to address the guidelines in maintaining the health protocols. All right. So yes, similar to what Josh said, as far as right, the immediate short-term solutions are concerned, we're doing what is necessary to maintain social distancing, having all the protocols in place for tracking. As a long-term viable solution, obviously we hope to see an end to the pandemic probably within the next 9 to 12 months at the earliest. So right now, what we're doing is more of a short-term solution to address the safety protocols. Ultimately, you will see a ramping up of need by occupiers to come into flexi space, and hopefully a vaccine is then already procured. That way, things can go back to normal. But right now, it's merely short-term solutions really to address this particular pandemic, this particular issue. Long-term viability-wise, definitely office space is going to, flexible office space is going to still play a very big role, all right? But you just have to think about the next 9 to 12, 15 months, just to make sure that we follow everything, to make sure that all our members, all our staff and colleagues are safe.
All right, Johnny, here's a question from Sebastian Coronel. After knowing that work from home can be an option for a lot of people and companies, why should investors invest more money in building office spaces? And to what extent will office spaces be adversely affected? If I were just to paraphrase that, it's like, really, I mean, what is the long-term outlook for commercial real estate in light of even in a post-COVID world, companies shifting to more flexible, if not just flexible workspacing, but work from home arrangements? Johnny.
If I had all the answers to that, I'd have a lot more money than what I've currently got, and probably wouldn't be in a 400 square foot apartment. But yeah, I think, look, it's really it's far too early to say, in my opinion. I think, look, most of us are in the middle of this. There's a lot of surveys and a lot of studies getting done at the moment. I think what I would say to that is let's have another look at those numbers in 6, 12, 18 months time. They might look a little bit different at that point. I think we all want social connection. I think there's opportunities to learn that come around. Fortunately, all of us on this call are a little bit older and a little bit further on in our careers. But if you were, I can't imagine being a 22-year-old or a 23-year-old just starting out my real estate career and having no one to learn off, and picking up things and interactions and just the softer skills that you learn by working with a senior member of the team and supporting senior members of the team. So you look at things like that, which make it really difficult. Ultimately, landlords of office buildings are going to have to work with the occupiers to make those buildings destinations and give the individual a reason to go to that office. I think one of the things this definitely has done is removed the ability for large landlords to build a glass office tower in the middle of town and sit back for the next 100 years collecting the rent off it. I think landlords are going to have to be much more active participants in the delivery of space and the delivery of services and amenities to those tenants, and particularly the actual individual, to get them to the office. Because if the individual is staying at home and not going to the office, then that's going to have a massive impact on the office market. I think depending on how this all plays out, there may be, in certain cities, less of a reliance on downtown central business districts. There may be, a much more, it might sort of even up where people take space, but I think ultimately, and we've also got to think around the other part. We just talked around social distancing, and we just talked around the fact that we can't have people in dense environments. So if all of a sudden an employer goes from 100 people using an office to 50 people using an office, it doesn't mean they can take half as the amount of space. They still need that same amount of space that they've got, because they need to spread their employees out a little bit more. So actually, are people going to shed that much space? I think, of course, businesses are going to, there's going to be some businesses that don't exist in 12 months' time because of financial issues. But yeah, people are going to shed space, and there's going to be a little bit of shedding the space. But is it going to be 50 or 100%? Probably not. My sense is that most companies, it's going to be closer to 10 or 20%. And as Ollie just said, and he's got his hand up here, so maybe this is a good segue into him, is that, that the employee costs, staff costs are usually significantly higher than actual office costs. So is the real cost here making sure the employee is safe and secure and got a good environment to work from? And
Oliver? Yeah.
The square footage that company takes is less relevant.
Yeah, Oliver, you're raising your hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a little bit of the data to what Johnny was kind of anecdotally saying there about kind of learning, because obviously that's a big component to all of our careers, right? And there is kind of a bit of misnomer out there that like the millennials or the Gen Zs are like the trickiest generation to manage when it comes to the office. But when you actually start to dig into the data from organizations like the Leesman Index again, you find that they're actually the happiest generation with their workplace. They have the most positive sentiment agreement with their productivity being catered for in terms of the offices that they're provided with. And it actually deteriorates as you get older, or your tenure increases with that organization. So it's actually the older generations that are having the worst time in offices today. And it's the reverse when we look at home working. So the millennials and Gen Zs, they're the least happy with home working in comparison to their different generations and peers. So what that tells me is it kind of reaffirms my belief in this kind of hub and spoke model, like Johnny was referring to earlier. We're still going to need these centralized hubs where you can indoctrinate your new employees, insert the Herman Miller chip, as we like to say when people join, and you just get that love and that belonging for the organization. And then once you're educated, when you've been with the business, when you've kind of through osmosis of being with your colleagues have just like become a good example of the business, then you can kind of go out and work in the spoke co-working type of facilities. And that seems to be what the data is saying as well, is that learning from others is really struggled during lockdown and physical distancing. So I think that's why we're still always going to need offices, but I think we can still leverage, this hub and spoke being the co-working or serviced office model in more kind of a decentralized fashion. So I just wanted to add that to Johnny's.
Indeed, there is a generational aspect to it. And the younger employees, of course, are the ones who need more of this team spirit. They're new to the organization. Corporate culture is still something they need to imbibe. Let me go to a question from Tatiana Gomez. Familiar name. I think she was with us as one of our speakers in a previous webinar. I think that's the same Tatiana, right? Here's her question, which is similar. How flexible spaces will foster a sense of community conducive to creativity and collaboration? Going back to the previous point you made, Oliver, about how some segments of the workforce look forward to that. And in cases of employers, need to do that to indoctrinate especially younger, newer employees. Oliver first, and I'll get Josh and Casey give their take on that as well.
That's a very good question, and I work with Tatiana. I promise I haven't asked her to ask that question because the answer to that might not be the way that people would think it would go. Because actually, during working from home, collaboration has increased, and so has creative thinking, which is the opposite to the way that you would think it would go. Because actually, we've still been, socially connected with one another through the medium of technology. So collaboration has actually increased. And again, I'm sorry, I keep referencing Leesman index data, but they have like a really good data set. They have over 50, well, the data I'm referring to is 50,000 strong from over 300 companies, about 60 different countries that's represented as well. So it's a very good data set. So actually collaboration during lockdown is 80%, creative thinking is 85%. From working from home, and in the offices, when we look at creative thinking, it was previously at 54%. So we just weren't supporting, and I think this is the key thing, is we weren't supporting people's ability to do individual work first in the majority of offices, because that's really what people care about. That's their primary need. Once that foundational level has been catered for, then you can build on top of that and start providing collaborative spaces and encouraging that to occur. But if you haven't got that individual, that individual first foundational layer first, then the whole thing falls apart like a deck of cards. I think there's a lot of workplaces that are overbaking collaborative areas, thinking that that's going to get everybody, creative and collaborative. But a lot of creativity, when I've asked thousands of people all over the world, where are you when you have your most creative ideas? Very few people say, like, in a group of people. They always say, like, on my own. And it's usually not in the office. Like, no one ever says, sat at my desk at work, that's where I have all my great, nobody says that. Nobody says in the office at all. So there's an issue here that needs to be addressed. And I think it's been highlighted by working from home that when we give people this freedom and we allow them to, tailor their own environment, because that's what you have at home, right? Then collaboration goes up and creativity goes up.
Okay, Josh, I'd like to hear what you have to say about that. Not everyone can, of course, work from home. Not everyone has access to high-speed internet. Not all corporations are collaborative in that way, or are able to create these common spaces for people online. Of course, a flexible workspace would be an alternative where they can be physically together, at least temporarily. So in your case, Josh, how do you foster this collaborative spirit or even a creative environment? Because that's also one of the upsides, supposedly, of having an office, is creating a creative environment. And many companies have invested a lot on interior design that fosters this kind of environment and atmosphere. Josh.
No, to Oliver's point, I think this goes back to what I said earlier about giving the people the choice, giving them choices in terms of what works best for them. If it means collaborative zones or quiet zones, like I mentioned earlier, then that is necessary to be implemented in the workspace. At the end of the day, it's how your team can really be productive in the work that they do, and I still believe there is a need to come into the office and be around the people and just gather the energy that is around the room to be creative. But yeah, to Oliver's point, there is also creativity that is fostered in being alone as well.
Are you able to create that atmosphere in a flexible workspace where it's a temporary workspace for some? Like the Flex and Core model, for example, how can you achieve that in a way that you're able to customize the space to fit the corporate culture of a client, for example, Josh, and Casey as well?
Yeah, it's really about listening to our members, right? It's knowing what works for the business. We in the executive center, we love listening to our members and tailor fitting their office based on their needs. If we have to paint the company colors on their walls and put their logo in and use the furniture that they're comfortable with, then that's what we'll do for them. It's not just the cookie cutter, 4 walls. That it's no longer about the 4 walls that we provide. If it's all about the 4 walls, I can go down to a coffee shop right now and still be productive. But that's not about what we're looking for right now. It's what makes them come back to work, and what makes them come back to the office. And so as we've had many clients who've requested for customization organization just to be able to bring that culture into the workplace. On top of that, being able to collaborate with even other teams is a plus side. It's a bonus to even get to collaborate with other businesses as well. So I definitely think there is an advantage in being able to be in a flexible workspace. And the key word is flexibility, right?
Yeah, Casey, quickly, flexible workspace, sometimes these contracts would be just like 6 months, 3 months, who knows? Is it possible to customize? Is it cost effective to customize? Your thoughts on this?
Oh, absolutely. A lot of the profiles of our members right now, or our occupiers, can range from anything from 4 seats, 30 seats, 100 seats, and some people are looking for easy plug and play for a duration of 3 months or 6 months. And this is basically where flexible workspaces come into play. We provide the agility for occupiers to come in on such flexible terms. It's very cost efficient from them because, number one, the deposits are not as expensive. There's no fit out cost to it. It's simply plug and play. Even seamlessly transitioning, let's just say for growth, people can easily transition from 4 seats to 50 seats depending on their business needs. And flexible workspaces provide the platform for these companies to grow. So there's a lot of simply going back to the amount of flexibility that we provide. So yeah, it's definitely easier for a lot of businesses in this new normal.
Johnny, you're raising your hand. Would you like to add quickly to what Josh and Casey were saying?
Yeah, I wanted to sort of add a comment and then maybe for a question if I could. So I think ultimately real estate and office space is one component part of what makes a company and what makes a culture. So you could have the best address, you could have the most expensive office, you could have the most flexible terms, you could have the best co-working operator or flex space operator in the building, but ultimately real estate can only go so far. And the question really was more directed at Ollie, is what are some of the things that organizations could do to beyond the physical, beyond the real estate, beyond the different products, but beyond the different leasing models, beyond all of that, what are some of the things that organizations could do to keep their employees engaged, keep them moving in the right direction, and improve the experience of their employees? My view is that comes down to the occupier listening to their employees and providing them what they need for a more productive and better day at work. And I think there are some of the flex operators in this world that do that really well. We've got 2 of them on this call that listen to their members, listen to the individuals, and make sure that they can get the best out of what they do when they come in by providing activities and different engagement and learning opportunities and things like that. And some of the operators do that, and I think potentially some occupiers will find that harder and harder to do and want to outsource that to an expert. And whether that expert is a flexible workspace or operator or not is a potential solution to that. But I'd like to just maybe get some insights from Ollie on that.
Yeah. So Oliver, how can flexible workspace operators again integrate all these, whether it's atmospheric, environmental, or human resource innovations to recreate that corporate culture?
Yeah, I mean, my background, I'm not an architect or a designer. My background's actually in psychology. So ultimately what I'm really interested in is the employees and how they're experiencing work in general. So work is a thing that you do, not necessarily a place that you go. And I think that's never been more true than during lockdown. So what we understand is that space has an effect, right? It has an effect on people. But management has a gazumping effect. So like according to Gallup, 70% of your engagement is whether you've got a good manager or not. So I could put Johnny in the Garden of Eden that's been specifically designed for him and his performance, but if his manager rolls out of bed the wrong side that day, he's going to have a bad day as well. So, management plays a really big part in this, but space also plays a key role because space is kind of constant. You want to change it maybe every couple of years according to the literature, because happiness and positive sentiment analysis goes down around 2 to 3 year mark. But what we've discovered at Herman Miller through our living office process, which is kind of a design for creating space, that we've been able to increase engagement by on average 7%. So that's not dramatic, it's not massive, but what we understand is that space has an effect, and it's a quantifiable effect. So we want to make sure that we maximize that to its maximum potential, and then management strategies also have to go hand in hand with that. But when you change space, you change culture, and you also have to change technology as well. It's kind of 3 legs of a chair, if you will. If you kick out one of them, then the whole thing again falls apart. So we want to make sure that people are catered for. Before I finish, I just wanted to throw in one thing on to add to this, is that like I said, I'm interested in people, and I'm trying to challenge clients a lot on looking at their space and catering for their people. And I use the metaphor of co-working and serviced offices a lot. And I ask everybody that's on the call today, if you work from a commercial office and your employer turned around to you tomorrow and said, right, you now have to pay for the privilege to come into your office, how many of you would actually turn up? How many of you would pay to come into your corporate office today? Because that is literally the business model of the 3 people that's on this call today. That's this kind of space that they're creating, is that people love consuming it so much they're willing to pay for it. Now, it might be their organization that's paying for it for them, but they have to figure it out to the nth degree to make sure that they can make the business case for those organizations that are consuming that space. So think about it like that. Their model is to focus on people, right? It's not about the space, it's about people and their happiness and their safety. Gents, I bet you never thought that you would have to be having people's life and death, in your hands with the spaces that you're providing for them and looking after, right? Because that's literally what's happening right now, is that, I'm having to, educate clients on like data from the World Health Organization and the CDC, so they don't start putting hazard tape everywhere, which is just ridiculous. But
Casey,
lots of companies do.
Casey, you're raising your hand. Would you like to add quickly to that?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about, just going back to what Jonathan and Oliver were saying, talking about what we were providing as a value add-on to our members. You want to talk about pre-COVID days, one of our value add-ons at Common Ground was where we would hold a series of events, talks that, require people to be physically on site on our venues to be able to participate in these things. And how we've sort of changed or adapted into the new normal, obviously, is that just like this webinar, our business model has to adapt on the technological side to access our members through webinars. Basically what we used to do on site now is done weekly or even every other day through webinars, and we tackle a wide array of subjects. And this creates the collaboration between our members. It creates the community it creates the vibe of community for our members. And of course, one of our value add-ons again at Common Ground is basically we have an app that pretty much connects our members with each other. It serves as a one-stop shop as far as getting to know who your co-tenants are in the workspace, what kind of business you can synergize with them. There are also value adds in terms of, for example, retail benefits, being a member in our venue. So these are some of the elements that contribute to creating that sense of community, of collaboration. And like just to touch on what Oliver said, tech being a very essential part of the business, these are one of the ways how we keep everybody connected, because obviously you're not in the office every day now. So how do you keep people connected? And we really have to take advantage of what's available to us. So this is basically, I want to touch on that.
Yeah, okay. We're running out of time, but we have maybe 2 more questions left. Let me prioritize the questions. Gosh, I had a full list of questions that I came up with, and I have no time to get to these because I'd like to give priority to our participants, of course. So let me go to this question here about, yes, here. Has to do with limitations. This is for flexible workspaces. Because of the quarantines and all sorts of restrictions and travel and transportation, how are you getting around that problem, where people have difficulty even accessing these temporary spaces? Josh, transportation, for example, has been a big issue here in Metro Manila.
Right. I mean, it's these times, where restrictions are really just a barrier for people to even come into work. Right now, more than ever, it's really about constantly communicating with our members and constantly checking in on them. I tell my team, we don't have to be physically in the same room for us to be able to still reach out to our members and see how they're doing. If they need a ride, or if they need for us to arrange a way for them to come in, if they necessarily do need to come in, then we'll provide it for them. At the end of the day, I mean, it's not an out of sight, out of mind where we just disappear because no one's coming into work. I mean, like what Casey has mentioned, we also provide the same community events or initiatives for our members to continue growing as a business. At the end of the day, we're in the business of other people's businesses, and for us, it's ensuring that they continue to grow despite the restrictions.
That question, by the way, was from Andreo Calonzo. Thank you so much. Casey, were you raising your hand? No.
Yeah, just to add very quickly to Josh, basically we are doing the same thing. Common Ground is fortunate enough to have strategically placed venues right now in Ortigas, Rockwell, and Makati. So this allows for a more seamless logistics as far as getting to the venues are concerned. Obviously, companies are looking to position offices closer to where their employees are residing right now. So obviously, that's a benefit for us. Secondly, yes, obviously listening to your members, we have to think outside the box. Providing transportation shuttle services with the appropriate health protocols is something that us as a flexible workspace operator is now actually selling to prospective members as well. So it's truly about listening to your members, just to add on to what Josh said, and trying to understand how can we provide complete solutions for your office needs, basically.
Okay, Johnny, just a question. I want to finish all the questions that came in. Some have been answered, so please forgive me if I'm not asking the same questions or similar questions. But this one is quite unique. And Johnny, maybe you could answer this. It's about, well, this is from Neil Rumbawa. Do you now consider hotels as competition? Because some hotels, apparently, according to Neil, are repurposing some floors, some suites, some rooms into temporary workspaces, flexible workspaces. Is this like a one-off thing, Johnny, or are we seeing this happening in many parts of the world? Not just hotels, but maybe similar structures, similar institutions.
Yeah, I think I'm actually preparing a session on this actually for a few weeks' time. So, but we've called it, disrupting the disruptors. So, if you think about co-working operators, service office operators, or flexible workspace operators generally, they have often been labeled disruptors of the sort of office market, and they themselves are potentially now being disrupted. So there's some of our competitors, CRE, JLL, Cushman have launched their own flex products. Colliers haven't, for a number of reasons. One of them because we actually think there's opens up a can of worms in terms of conflicts of interest. But some of the service providers like us that have launched their own, they've very good platforms, and there are definitely a lot of pros to a landlord using a service provider or an occupier using a service provider that's been in the real estate market for a long time. So that is potentially one competitor. The other competitors, of course, are landlords doing their own thing. And of course, hotels have moved into the sector. Some have repositioned current hotels into office space. Some have also working with landlords to actually develop flex products to go into actually office buildings. So Soho House have Soho Works, the Hoxton have Working From, a core of launched brands. So there are some flex brands out there that are coming from the hospitality industry, and yeah, it's definitely a competitor for sure.
Okay, I just want to end with this final question from Anton De Leon. Pretty much, it's a good way to end this conversation. Any example or current experience from your clients? This is for Josh and Casey, maybe, of having these flexible workspaces during this time, in terms of how they have juggled with the business decision of having to spend for flexible workspace versus being liquid, I think this is at the bottom of this webinar, really people faced with cost cutting and having to decide whether they should just go status quo, shift to work from home permanently, or at least in a bigger way, or opt for flexible workspaces. Any specific clients you can mention? If not the actual company name, maybe a case study. Casey?
Yeah, we've had some instances where, the truth is that some companies are downsizing now, where previously they used to occupy larger floor plates. They've obviously reduced that, and they've come to us simply for basic, from 30 employees, now they're only employing 4 or 5, and obviously the need is much smaller. So they're looking to occupy maybe a private office with 4 chairs. And that's happening daily as we speak. We're getting more and more inquiries. It's simply going back to being more cost efficient, right, with your budget. And obviously it doesn't make sense to run a whole floor space since the business has unfortunately suffered. And that's where we kind of help them out. This way you don't have to spend so much on fit out. Basically, I can offer you flexible terms, and this is happening daily as we speak.
Josh, what about you? Especially for companies who are just about to launch and now have to maybe postpone that decision. I mean, this becomes like an opportunity for them.
Yeah, I want to go back to the flex and core sort of model that we were talking about. Having a traditional lease for your core team and then supplementing it with flexible workspaces within the same building or city or region will give businesses that flexibility to adapt to the changes, and the costs associated will always be on an on-demand basis. We've had even pre-COVID, one of our clients in Sydney who occupied a floor in one of our buildings. They need some project space for about 3 months as they didn't have the space to really grow, or it didn't make sense to take up more space. So they looked to us to house their team. Let's just say that was 5 years ago, and they're still with us. And multiple times teams come in and out. They've upsized, they've downsized, they upsized again. These clients are able to do to do this in a more cost-effective way because of the flexibility that we're able to provide them. And this will work as well. Post-COVID, where cash is tight and you want to put your capital elsewhere versus having to do fit outs and do all purchase all the infrastructure necessary.
All right, thank you so much. Before we go, just like to have each of our speakers maybe just give some closing lines or remarks. Johnny, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think that basically 2 things I would sort of say. I think going forward, we touched on it earlier, but I think landlords are going to have to be sort of much more active participants in creating environments that employees, individuals want to go to, and working with their occupiers as kind of customers rather than tenants. I think that's going to be super important going forward, and I think that will spur on a greater level of partnership with flexible workspace operators. And then this kind of leads to my next point, and I think those flexible workspace operators that succeed going forward are going to be the ones that deliver more than just space. So all the stuff that we've talked about on this call is, I think landlords are going to want to partner with the operators that can help with engagement, that can help with a broad array of models, so that the occupier can use different flex models and occupancy models, and a broader range of actual physical products to the buildings. But I think critically, operators that can sort of do more than just space, so that they can really help with that activation and that engagement. And then and that will sort of lead to a sort of greater sort of outsourcing of sort of workspace to the operators that can do that. So I think that they're the 2 things that I would kind of close with.
All right, thank you, Jonathan. Casey?
So we honestly believe that while work from home will essentially be part of the new normal moving forward, we firmly believe that the workspace environment is still essential to the ultimate combination in providing effective productivity. So we're here to address the needs of what the occupiers might require in the future. We're trying to stay ahead of the game and see what we can provide to make sure that everything that they can think of we'd be able to provide. Just going beyond the physical space. That's what Jonathan mentioned.
How about you, Josh? Some closing words.
Yeah, I mean, same vein as what Jonathan has mentioned. I mean, the office is changing, the way we work is changing, the way we think about work is changing, and where we do it has changed. I mean, the workspace of the future absolutely needs to be, agile and versatile to adapt to, these changes in the world. Real estate strategy, which involves flexible space, really doesn't only mean flexible lease terms or, operational capacity or workspace size, but it truly means flexibility that you can offer to your teams. Wherever and however this goes, wherever we choose to move forward past COVID-19, we'll inevitably see a workplace trend where professionals place higher value on their flexibility, and we always have to keep people in mind. And landlords, fit-out contractors, everybody needs to be on board.
Oliver, any key insights you'd like to leave our audience with?
Yeah, I see a big and bright future for the commercial environment, but also co-working as well. I think that's going to only increase as time goes on. But what I would say is more of I'm pleading the co-working community to please start to understand ergonomics, because I'm just not seeing it in any of their facilities. That being said, the Executive Center is a shining example of what physical ergonomics looks like. But ergonomics is more than just physical, it's also cognitive and social. All of these three elements need to be taken into consideration as well. So yeah, it's great to create a space that looks really pretty and, as Johnny said, is Instagrammable. But what's the science and evidence behind the beautification of that space? Are you catering for physical, cognitive, and social ergonomics? At the moment, I'm just not seeing it, except for the Executive Center example. I would love to see at least the provision of a good chair in most of these spaces, because actually what employees care about first and foremost is access to a desk and a chair, a workstation, and chair being the #1 most important factor to an employee. So invest in good ergonomics. A good chair is like fundamental.
Thank you, Oliver. Well, the good news is we're raffling off a chair, a Herman Miller chair, at the end of this program. Before we get to that, I'd just like to thank our panelists, Johnny Wright of Colliers International. Thank you so much, Jonathan. Josh Alfafara of the Executive Center, thank you. Casey Velhagen of Common Ground Philippines, and of course, Oliver Baxter of Herman Miller. I think we can leave this with a good understanding of new ways that companies can explore their operational requirements and navigate their way through this new normal and give people and businesses a chance to recover with success. I like this webinar, I love it. In fact, I really believe that it's all about giving options and choices, not just to companies, but to employees as well. And that's exactly what we were able to talk about. Okay, so we've come to the point in the program, our webinar that is. I know this is the part our viewers have also been waiting for. They've been pretty excited about since the very beginning. We're gonna give away a chair. We're gonna do it through a raffle. Originally for an Express 2 chair, I understand. This is courtesy of CWC Interiors. But before that, to give the closing remarks and announce our winner, I'd like to call on the Director for Tenant Representation at Colliers International Philippines, my good friend, Dom Frederick Andaya. Dom?
Amazing conversation, gentlemen. We reached 497 attendees. The platform nearly exploded. So thank you for your participation in this Lifespaces webinar series, which is meant to share knowledge and insights to our partners so they can embrace and adapt to this new normal. In the first part, we spoke about how workplace health and wellness should be a top priority of companies when they go back to work, which could become their competitive advantage. For the second part, we aim to provide some solutions to our clients in the revival and survival of businesses through flexible workspace, hub and spoke, and digital campus strategies that can allow for agility for companies to contract, grow, or reposition while minimizing valuable commercial real estate resources. We know that everyone is looking for explanations and answers to figure out what's going on. That's when we realized that collaboration can drive exceptional results, which is one of our core values. Our collaboration with CWC International and Herman Miller is a testament to this through the success of the Lifespaces webinar series. At Colliers, we value client relationships. That is why we have intensified our engagement with clients through insightful and meaningful conversations about the property market and trends to help our clients make sense of what is going on and be able to figure out together a way forward. I hope you're able to accomplish that today. We advocate incremental decision making through this data-driven approaches to overcome this extremely dynamic condition. It is a conscious decision on our part to invest in relationships to deliver enduring value to our clients. At this point, I want to thank Jonathan Wright, our Director for Flexible Workspace Services at Colliers International, covering the Asia Pacific region, for sharing his valuable time and insights. The participation of Casey Velhagen of Common Ground, Josh Alfafara of the Executive Center, and Oliver Baxter of Herman Miller gave more depth to the meaningful conversations. So thank you as well. Thank you for fleshing out the topic so well by giving insightful and practical tips that can provide clearer directions to occupiers to implement the suggested strategies. Similar to David, I personally like giving the employees the power of choice leads to engagement. The seamless facilitation of David and the excellent questions from the audience gave this webinar the much needed energy and depth that brought out more insights than expected. Lastly, and more importantly, I want to recognize the core teams from Colliers International, CWC Interiors, and Herman Miller, who all work hard to make this event possible. We are looking forward to have more meaningful conversations with you in the third part of the Lifespaces webinar series. Please reach out to us should you feel we could be of help, as we are always glad to have meaningful conversations with you. So it's not over yet. The raffle of the Herman Miller chair is next. May I call on Joe Rinkonen, Product Manager of Herman Miller.
So today we're very excited to talk about the Veris chair. So again, thank you for the time. Before we talk specifically about Veris, however, we always think it's important for us to talk a little bit about Herman Miller seating in general and what's so important for us. So for us, when we look at our chairs, well, each of our chairs is uniquely suited for different tasks. All of our high performance work chairs empower the body so that people can stay comfortable as they think, create, and share ideas. Our chairs achieve this through 3 shared strands of DNA. So these are the 3 things that we certainly always think about as we launch any product and bring anything to market. These 3 things are natural balance movement, total spinal support, and dynamic fit. So you're probably wondering, all right, Joe, that sounds cool. What does that actually mean? So for us, when we talk about natural balance movement, this is how the chair works in tandem with the body's natural pivot points. So those pivot points being your hips, your knees, and your ankles. So Herman Miller has spent tens of millions of dollars in decades researching how the body moves from seated upright to reclined and everywhere in between. We use proprietary tilts to make sure that you're properly supported throughout whatever posture you're in. The next thing we focus on is this idea of total spinal support. For this, I'm sure out of the 450 people who are still on the call, I'm sure that some of you have heard of a lumbar support. And in fact, there's probably even a couple of you who are maybe taking a pillow and being resourceful and kind of putting it in your lower back between your back and the chair to help maintain this natural, healthy S shape of your spine. But Herman Miller, although we do believe that the lumbar region is important, we've actually taken it a step further, and we've actually gone down to the base of the spine, the sacral region. Okay, so that's down here, kind of in your where your tailbone is. This is our patented anti-slouch technology, if you think about it that way. When your back is engaged with the posture fit, it's not possible for your hips to rotate rearward, meaning you're going to always maintain that healthy S shape of your spine. And then finally, the dynamic fit, which are just how strong and then flexible materials are used in order to help distribute the weight and as well as heat. So for this, if you've ever sat on the ground before and your legs start to go numb, that means you're not getting good circulation. So with our products, we use materials which will help with pressure distribution, and then it'll help us make sure that we are able to stay thermal neutral. Many times heat buildup is one of the first signs of discomfort, and then that makes people start to fidget and then kind of lose their good posture. Okay, so more importantly now, as we talk about Veris specifically, so Veris is our newest chair that we offer. With Veris, we provide ergonomics and comfort at an equally comfortable price point for both the short-term or long-term sit. It's part of Herman Miller's global offering, and it's designed for use in a bunch of different environments, whether that's in meeting rooms, collaborative spaces, co-working spaces, or even like working from home. It still comes with our industry-leading 12-year 3-shift warranty, and it's gone through the same rigorous testing protocols that you would expect from a Herman Miller chair. By leveraging all of our years of research, we've been able to find ways to take cost out and make this a very attainable option. And so we think we're very excited for launching this in the Philippines. It's also a very versatile aesthetic. You can see on the screen here, there's 3 different back types that are available with this work chair. The image on the far right, which is, you kind of see half of that back, that's a fully upholstered version of the chair. So that's available in many different fabrics for people to choose from. You can then see in the middle image, the one in blue, that's our suspension material. What's so important to highlight there is it's suspension versus mesh. So with our suspension material, we're actually able to maintain different zones of support. So we're able to provide more tension in different parts of your back where you need it, and then maybe a little bit less tension in different areas where it's best for you to be able to nest into the chair. So just a very, very dynamic backrest. And then the other option that's available is this triflex back, which is kind of that orangish color that we have on the screen. What's so cool about this, we've gotten asked many times, what is Herman Miller thinking as people return to the office from COVID, and what are some of the things that our seating team specifically is looking at? With the triflex back, it's a very cool option because it's a very durable polymer, which means that it can withstand very strict cleaning protocols. So that way it's up to the standards of anyone's health and safety for any individual client. So that's something that we certainly recommend as we end up seeing more clients who are interested in returning to the office or in some of these co-working spaces as well, just to make sure that we're doing everything we can to keep people healthy and safe. Looking at a few of the ergonomic features that we offer with Veris, because again, of course, for us, ergonomics is such an important piece. So not only will things be designed well and function well, but the ergonomics and the research is so important. For us, you can see that this first image, it shows the fully adjustable arms. We do have it available with no arms, fixed height arms, height adjustable arms, or fully adjustable arms, depending on whatever the end user's requirement is. You can then see in that second image how we have posture fit built into Veris. So you can see just with this form, at the base of the backrest, it kind of pushes forward, and so that's going to make sure that your sacral region is properly supported. Okay, and then the next one, we do have that optional height adjustable lumbar support, so people can have that if they want. What's pretty cool with the suspension one here is you can actually remove this or you can add it after the fact without any tools. So it's just a little clip that you can remove or add to it in the future, and it just provides a bit more support in that lumbar region of your spine. And then finally, we have the contoured seat pad that you can see. So not only is it shaped to kind of fit the anatomy of humans, but also we use injection molding and then extra dense foam. And what that does then is that allows the chair to stand strong for over the course of that 8, 10, 12-hour shift that people may be working, as well as that 12-year 3-shift warranty. So all of these features kind of come together in order to help really promote quite an ergonomic story, but coming at a much more attainable price point for clients of almost any budget. So some of you might be wondering, so what would Veris look like at home? So we're going to try a technology here. It may not work for some people, so don't panic. We still certainly have a brochure that's attached in the handouts, which can show you a bunch of these images. But for those of you who are viewing this webinar off of a laptop or monitor, feel free to take out your smartphone and open the camera on it. We have a QR code up here that once you open up your camera and you kind of hover over it, there'll be a link that'll pop down. Here in Singapore, QR codes are actually just becoming second nature for us because anytime we go into a building, we have to scan it. So hopefully you guys are familiar with how the QR codes work. But yeah, again, once you open up that link, it'll take somewhere between 30 and 45 seconds, just depending on your internet strength. And once that page loads, you'll be able to kind of spin the chair around, be able to see what it looks in 3D. And then what's really cool is there's a little blue button that says View in AR. And what'll happen then is it'll open up your camera, and and you'll be able to see the Verus chair all in black right there in your space. So whether you're working at home right now or if you're at the office, you'll be able to see what it looks like at your workspace. So pretty cool technology. Hoping that you know, it'll be easy enough to kind of understand. But yeah, so as people are doing that, I get to actually break some pretty good news. So I know we mentioned, David has mentioned that we were going to give away an Express 2 chair at the beginning of the webinar. And I know it's on the invite and social media, but instead we've decided to upgrade it to Verus. So yeah, just very, very exciting for us to be able to do that. It'll actually be the very first Verus chair in the Philippines. So for those of you who were able to open up the app and be able to view it in that augmented reality, that's the exact chair you'll get. So it'll be in black. And so for one lucky winner that we'll raffle off here in a second, I guess it won't be augmented reality, it's going to be your reality going forward. So with that being said, I'd like to just hand it back over to David to raffle off the Verus chair. So thanks again for the time, everyone. Really looking forward to getting some good feedback on the chair.
Hey, thanks so much, Joe, and of course Dom earlier for his closing remarks. Yep, it actually works. This is the Verus chair, at least the virtual one, because the actual one will be raffled off right now to some lucky participant. So how do we do this? Joe and Thea, Dom, let's start the raffle. Let's see who wins this chair. This will be the first Verus chair in the Philippines. Imagine you don't only get a fantastic ergonomic chair from Herman Miller, but you actually get the first one that arrived in the Philippines. Imagine that.
Pretty exciting. I wish I was part of the. I wish I could win it, but I'm not part of the raffle. So, okay. So you see on your screen there the raffle wheel for the screen. So are we ready to spin?
Spin a win.
Yes, let's spin. Okay. It's actually the chair, the Verus chair in the middle, right there.
That's right.
Okay, who's the lucky winner?
This is quite an upgrade.
Yeah.
An upgrade from the Express 2. Like really generous from CWC Interiors and Herman Miller.
Okay.
Okay. There's a winner. There's a name.
Armando Nang. Okay, let me check if he's here because you have to be here. Hold on. Oh, I don't think he's here.
Wow.
I will.
No one tell him he actually won that chair, because if you're not available on screen, you don't get that chair. Okay, next one, Thea.
Okay,
look for
can
David
you have
Celdran
another
there,
spin?
As Oliver said, don't underestimate the benefits of an ergonomic chair. And Herman Miller definitely make some of the best in the world, if not the best. I've got a number of Herman Miller chairs there, and I have to tell you, they really make working from home bearable, more than bearable.
Adore Perez. Okay, let's see. He's not here. He or she, I don't know.
What's wrong with these people? Okay, don't they want this chair?
A lot of people
I'll
have
have
already.
I'll have it instead.
There's still 400 plus people in here, so we
I
will get some.
441 to be precise.
Yeah. Okay. Another spin. Lucky winner.
Okay, we have 440 participants.
Some of them
as long as you're in the room, right? You don't have to be sitting down in front of the screen. So long as you're still logged on, right?
As long as you're here, yes. As long as you're still logged on in the attendee list. Siegfried. He is here.
All right.
Yes, Siegfried Roy is here. You can send us a message in the chat and just to confirm, and we will contact you for your Verus chair. Congratulations, Siegfried.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you, Thea. And of course, Joe, thank you so much. And to Dom earlier again. And congratulations to our winner, Siegfried. Our team will reach out to you to arrange how you can receive that prize. Now, for our viewers today, you're welcome to reach out to the organizing teams if you have any further questions or would like more information about what we just talked about. Once again, I'm David Celdran. And on behalf of Colliers International Philippines, CWC Interiors, Herman Miller, and the ABS-CBN News Channel, thank you all for attending our webinar today. Stay safe, stay healthy. Goodbye, everyone. We'll see you again for the next webinar.